The Quest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to this episode of the Quest Podcast with me, Danny Lawler. If you're new to the Quest Podcast, do hit like and subscribe, and feel free to share, send it out into the world as well. This episode of the Quest Podcast deals with something really topical because it's about to come into effect within about 2 months of the recording date of the episode, and that's Emir Refit. Now, Emir is the European Markets Infrastructure Regulation. It deals with a lot of things, but the thing that we're particularly interested in is the reporting of derivative trades to a trade repository. And Emir Refit is a refresh of that regime that makes things even harder. So it ups the number of lines of information that need to be reported and increases the demands, changes the reporting format, does lots of different things. But basically, as I said, makes things a bit harder for firms that have to report. So who better to talk to about the complexities of this and how firms are getting on with their preparations than two experts in the area. And they're Aoife Storey, who's the Client Solutions Manager at Fundrex, and Gerard Gilsenan, the Chief Revenue Officer at Fundrex. Now, these guys at Fundrex have been on Emir and Emir Refit for a little while now. Their tech is pretty clever about reconciling what gets reported versus what you think should get reported. So they really know their stuff, and they've spent a lot of time with different types of clients, understanding the challenges that those clients have, how they're facing up to them. And they have a good sense for where the market is at in terms of practice and readiness, and how firms are going to get over the hump of 29th of April, which is the date that Emir Refit kicks in. So they're the topics that make up our conversation. It's pretty wide-ranging across all of that, and they do give some great insights into what firms can expect and how they can start to get ready, even at this late stage. So with that, let's get on with the show.
The Quest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hi, Gerard, Aoife, great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks for having us.
So we're about 2 months out from the start of Emir Refit. Are you excited?
Yeah, a lot going on in terms of Fundrex, getting ready for Refit, preparing our clients as well for the date for the 29th of April. But yeah, excited.
Are your clients excited?
Yeah, there's the move onto the new system, which we're currently working through with our client base. So getting them on to that and going through all the testing and outputs with Emir Refit. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
Well, let's talk a bit about Emir Refit and how it differs from Emir, and then I'm interested to chat about the kind of the Fundrex story on it, because you guys are pretty much all over this, more so than probably anybody else in the marketplace. But in terms of how Emir differs, or Emir Refit differs from Emir, and obviously we talk about 29th of April because that's when Emir Refit comes into full effect. What are the key kind of differences from Refit that you see?
Yeah, for original Refit or current Emir, a lot of our clients, obviously the process is looking at the reconciliation between the admin and trade repository. That won't change with Refit. And then the oversight of the data quality piece is probably the main difference. The reporting requirements change and the addition of all the additional fields for the data quality process. So it's going from 100 or so fields with original Emir to 203 fields with Refit. One of the things that we offer is the oversight of all of those 203 fields from a data quality perspective, and then looking at the overall harmonization of the reporting from current Emir to new. So that is one of the key changes, is looking at what fields are relevant in Refit and what fields we need to look at in more detail in terms of, are the fields populated with valid data as opposed to is a field populated at all with current Emir. It's kind of one of the big changes and one of the big parts of our data verification rules in Fundrex that we'll be able to provide to our clients.
Yeah, so with Emir Refit, you say it's even more reporting than what was there before, so a different format of the reporting, but generally upping the ante on what gets reported. And then, of course, central banks always looking at this data. They're beating the drum about data quality and timeliness. So that's going to be another part of getting, firms getting right for Emir Refit.
Yeah, I think across Europe, regulators have a big focus on data quality now because it's a priority for ESMA. But I think even stepping back and looking at Emir Refit, the responsibility has shifted from, the fund to the usage management company or the AFM. So that's, firms are taking a different approach, a more focused approach to oversight, ensuring that they have framework in place, they've got policies and procedures documented. A lot of firms delegate reporting, oversight can't be delegated, or the responsibility can't be delegated. So they need to have strong oversight framework in place. So that's obviously been a big change over the last 12 or 18 months where, management companies and AIFMs are now starting to review their approach to EMIR and what they used to do before versus what they need to do now and what's expected from the regulator. They've been very clear, the CBI and the CSSF in Luxembourg, the FCA and other regulators have been very clear on what they expect, and data quality needs to be improved.
Yeah, and certainly that shifting of the responsibility onto the fund management company for OTC reporting is one of the things I think that's kind of grabbed the attention and is helping to get Emir Refit kind of on the agenda for Manco boards and get through and get the build in place to make sure firms are in a decent position when 29th of April was on.
Yeah, 100%. But I think, with the central bank here in Dublin as well, in some of their communications, they've referred it back onto the board, and they said that boards need to be taking a more proactive approach to ensuring that, the funds and management companies that they're own are actually looking at EMIR and ensuring that this data is complete and accurate. And from a regulator perspective, more eyes are on this data. There's different departments using it. They use it as part of their stress testing of the market. They use it to forecast conditions, try and anticipate market events that impact the economy. And that's why the data needs to be really, really clean. And I think, they've learned a lot over the last 9 or 10 years under EMIR and since EMIR has been introduced, and how they might use that data, what they use it for. And there's an expectation now that, the data needs to be of a high quality for the central bank and for regulators across Europe to do their job. But also, if you look at some of the communications from some of the regulators and reading something from the CSSF yesterday as well, they want to see managers, using the data within their own risk management processes and understanding, data might be correct, but from a risk perspective, is our position right?
Yeah.
So they want it's not just a case of, report the data, my job in a year is done, but they actually want to see managers using it within their own internal businesses.
Well, let's come back to that one, because that sounds like kind of the ultimate place to be when you're not only able to report everything you need to report in the time frame that you need to report it, but that you can actually extract some value from it. But Aoife, we've spoken a lot to firms through our lunch and learn sessions who are going through the process. I guess there's quite a lot of challenges to try and get a firm ready for decent quality EMIR Refit reporting on the 29th of April. What kind of are the top challenges you see that firms have?
Yeah, I think it's probably the communication to their brokers and getting across where the responsibility lies with Refit in terms of submitting the trades and actually having the corrected entity responsible for the reporting populated in the correct field to be able to see the trades either from a Manco or a investment manager side. So it's really depending on the main challenges, to be honest, with communication with brokers.
So is that because generally the fund management company will delegate the reporting obligation to the broker?
Yeah. So then actually trying to get access to that reporting through the trade repository, they have to have their LEI populated in the ERR field to be able to oversee and have oversight over those trades with the trade repositories that way.
And what's the appetite for the brokers to take on this reporting and do it at a good standard and populate the LEI piece for the ERRs?
They obviously have to do it. It's just, to be honest, what I've seen, it's middle of the road. It's a lot of our clients are communicating that out to brokers, and then whether they're testing or not, it's in the middle. But we have received a lot of test data from the clients that have had brokers that have successfully submitted under the new schema. It's just, that's probably the main challenge that I've seen to date, is getting that test data in and getting the outputs out. And
then in terms of, I guess, of where they're sourcing that data, whoever is actually doing the reporting, whether it's the broker, is it data that they have readily to hand to fill out these 203 fields, or is it a big ask to kind of get their hands on what they need?
I think it is a bit of an ask, because what I've seen is we're getting the outputs from, say, DTCC, Regis or Univista from the trade repositories, but also all the fields aren't populated. So the test data that I've got received so far doesn't have everything populated, and a lot of data quality checks are coming out of that, like issues. We will expect that with the first few weeks of Refit when it changes over on the 29th of April, and there will be a high volume, I would say. But, we have that 180-day window where the clients have that window to be able to backload trades or update procedures internally to get the corrected format out there and the correct.
This is we're talking a little bit more about the 180
Sure,
days. What
yeah.
what kind of get out of jail card is that for
I guess it's not
firms?
get out of jail card, but more so of giving a buffer of those few months to be able to backload any open trades through the new schema. So it has to be under refit, and then it also is time to look at your procedures internally and just make sure that what is being executed is being done. And then once that 180 days is done, you'd have everything backloaded, the corrected trades going in with all the formats that you'd expect to see, obviously with some outliers with data quality issues, but I'd say that 180 days will spike issues from the data quality outputs, some of them accurate based on what's being reported, and then anything backloaded, it'll flush out all those issues.
And so, you know, there are challenges there. The date of 29th of April has been around for quite a while. And of course, it builds in a pre-existing regime under Emir. So firms ought to be, you know, in a pretty good place by the 29th of April. But I don't know if that's always the experience we have, Gerard, when we talk to firms.
No, and I think with any regulatory deadline, there will be some firms really well prepared. Other firms will probably scramble a little bit. There'll be other firms unprepared, and you know that's always going to be the case, and it'll go right down to the wire, I think, across the board. But even post April 29th, it's not a black and white. All of a sudden it needs to be 100% accurate all the time, and I think that comes back to oversight in general, where oversight's in place because issues do happen, dealing with managers and the counterparties who are reporting the data, tens of thousands of positions, tens of thousands of transactions, huge numbers of data points, very high volume, a lot of complexity. So it's about having a proper oversight framework in place so that where issues are identified or where issues happen, they can be identified and then remediated. So post the 29th of April, it's not expected. I don't think, certainly, and not speak to from a right or speak for a regulator, that everything's going to be 100% right.
No.
Again, it comes it comes back to having processes and procedures in place to catch things when they are out of sync, and being as prepared as you can.
What do you think the 29th of April is going to look like, Aoife? Is it, well, I don't want to say how bad is it going to be, but I get the sense that there'll still be plenty to work on after the 29th of April. Like, I mean, it's not going to be the be all and end all in terms of perfection.
Yeah, we've chatted to the trade repositories independently and just checked with them what their kind of cutoff is for the 29th, because the current Emir, we're getting a trade state report with all the reported trades. It's going to switch to the new Emir Refit trade state report. And a question a lot of people or firms are asking us is what's the switchover? Are we not receiving the old report anymore? How will we run our current data quality, etc.? So for us, and even in Fundrax, we're going to do a parallel between current data quality rules and refit data quality rules. That should flush out any of the real issues that we can see on reported trades prior to the 29th of April and then post. So then we have a bit of a parallel as to what are the real data quality issues for our clients. And then with that 180 days, as we were saying, we'll run those two parallels. Some might want to reduce that down before the 180 days. Some others might want to go up to the wire with 180, but then they'll go full refit data quality on all the mandatory fields. And then they should be in a position with that to have a level of comfort. As I said, there will be a spike of issues with everything we're running on the refit checks, but as Ger said, having that correct oversight in place is kind of the main outcome that you want when you're switching over to
and how do you find dealing with the trade repositories? Obviously, they're a very key part of this whole ecosystem. Are they very plugged in and clued into it and receptive to engaging with stakeholders and answering queries?
Yeah, they've actually been great. We have partnerships with DTCC and Regis, and we joined their working groups on a monthly basis, so they give really good updates in terms of their timelines for getting out the new trade state reports and any new releases going to their system. And then they've joined us in working groups as well to answer questions for our clients and with us directly. So yeah, it's been a good open line of communication.
And so you mentioned governance a few times, Ger, because obviously for the most part, the firms that we deal with here in Ireland are going to delegate the task of performing the reporting to somebody else, often the broker, but they're going to retain the responsibility for that, which of course they can't do anything other than that. And so with the complexity and the volume of information that needs to be reported, it's not going to be physically possible to be on top of everything all the time. that governance piece then becomes even more important. So what kind of frameworks are you seeing firms take? How are they approaching the governance piece? Are they looking to replicate everything that is done on their behalf, or sampling, or what's the general approach to governance and understanding that the delegator is reporting in the way that they should?
Yeah, I think, in conversations with our clients and other firms in the industry, there's a desire to do the best we can, but there needs to be some reasonableness into the process as well, because, you could have, feasibly hundreds of thousands of data points to check every day, and it may not necessarily be the best use of someone's time to do that. And so, it's about looking at each firm on an individual basis, determining, okay, here's the volume of derivatives activity that we have across our book of business. These are the positions we hold. This is what that position looks like against the entire portfolio. So there's all those sorts of things. And then from that point, then determining, okay, what sort of oversight model should I have in place? And, from our customers, and I think one of the things that have come out of the working group is, we run data quality checks on a daily basis, and then it looks towards more of a month-end reconciliation process, where it does a full end-to-end rec of the book of record at each month-end. But on a weekly basis, or twice a week, depending on volume, complexity, all these sorts of things, firms might choose to review the data quality, see if there's any issues appearing, see if there's any trends, and start to address them during the month. But it really, governance is it needs to form part of each firm's decision making as the approach they take and what they deem to be appropriate levels of governance.
Yeah.
Not to sit on the fence, but I think the regulator would say the same.
Yeah, and so it does seem like there's some form of kind of quite active oversight, which is probably daily or something around that is kind of where the market is trending towards. Is that kind of, Aoife, is that like a RAG system where you're getting flags to say these are your key issues that you need to be aware of what's come up over the last 24 hours?
Exactly, yeah. So that trade state report that I mentioned from the trade repositories, we receive that every day via an SFTP. So it comes directly to us, doesn't go through a client, and we run the data quality checks on that every single day.
So this is directly from the TR, this is the TR saying
Exactly.
This is the information we've received.
Exactly. And then on those reported trades, we're running those mandatory, conditional, optional checks based on the ESMA validation rules for current EMIR, for example, and returning then these are your exceptions. So then a client will get every day, weekly, as Ger said, whatever their kind of risk procedures are, but they have all of their exceptions in one report for every reported trade.
So when they're using the FundRec system, you're pulling that data from the TR, you're producing something for them on a daily basis.
Yeah.
If they weren't using FundRec system on doing something else, they'd have some other means of achieving the same thing, which is effectively understanding or getting this high level report on a very frequent basis to understand where the business is at and what the quality of reporting is looking like.
Yeah, I guess the benefit of using us is that they get all funds in one report, all checks, all exceptions. So it's, to eyeball a report like that with so many fields, obviously 100 or so, like it's not possible to do manually. So you need an automation process for that to just give you that high level.
Yeah, and I think from the expectations from the regulators are that you have a systematic approach in place, and relying on attestations, which over the first number of years under EMIR, a lot of firms relied on that. That's not acceptable anymore. To be doing spot checks on a quarterly basis isn't going to be acceptable anymore. There needs to be a proactive approach to oversight, and for a lot of firms, I would say most firms, due to the volume of activity that they'd have, having any sort of manual process wouldn't really work.
Yeah.
You need to take a systematic approach, be that with FundRecs or with some other option. But to do it properly, you need to use technology and utilize that, because otherwise, mistakes will happen, clerical error, take a lot of manual human resources to be able to do this properly.
Yeah, I see a lot of parallels with how firms are approaching oversight of the delegated EMIR reporting compared to how they would approach the oversight of portfolio management or risk management. Certainly, as that's progressed and become more sophisticated over the last few years. So it generally does involve pulling in raw data or an independent source of data into the business, some form of daily analysis, and then a monthly review that's more broad ranging and deeper to dive into whatever has happened over that period. But definitely a real move away from attestations, a real move away from drawing comfort from the responsible delegate simply telling you that everything is fine, and much more of an analysis on behalf of the firm itself to make sure that it's comfortable that everything is as it should be. And that just seems to be the trend towards what firms are approaching Emir oversight of delegated reporting.
Yeah, and then something else that we do kind of along with that data quality daily output is we give clients a monthly oversight report that basically looks at trends of their data quality. So we look at prior issues that they've had on their prior month end versus current. And what we should see is obviously that trend going downwards in terms of number of issues. And then with the resolution of using that data quality report every day,
Yeah,
they should really see the number up.
I think that's really important
Mhm.
because I say 29th of April will come around and I don't think anybody expects things to be perfect. But I guess we would hope that on the 30th, they're slightly more perfect, slightly better on the 30th than the 29th. And then on the 1st, that there's a trend in the right direction, albeit that it might not be perfect day one. I think the issue would be if it was a bit off the mark on the 29th of April and then you look at it at the end of September and it's still in the same place. I think that's when you've got to really think about it.
Yeah, and I think we've seen firms on our side, buy side firms that are on the management side that are really well prepared, super in control of the situation, know exactly what's going to happen, probably feel a little bit anxious themselves. And the same with brokers, we've seen brokers that are really clued in, really prepared. But there's always going to be people out there that use the deadline as, okay, this will be UAT. We just start reporting whenever we have, and it'll just kick back out, and we'll fix it as we go along over a couple of months. And I think the thing is that firms, if you're on the manager side and those things happen, is not to panic, but just make sure that you're catching those situations.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be in a situation where post April at any time in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, where a regulator is knocking on your door, having identified issues that you're not aware of.
Yes.
And so that conversation is different to the one where the regulator knocks on the door and asks you about 1,000 positions that you've already identified and have a remediation process for it.
Completely different conversation. And then, so obviously we saw at the end of November that a fund was sanctioned by the central bank for a failure to report. And in that instance, it was quite a lot of trades. It was 200,000 trades over about a 2-year period, which was identified eventually and then rectified. But the central bank determined that it was appropriate to sanction that instance. What impact has that had, do you think, on well, let's talk about our universe, mostly fund management companies, in terms of bringing this topic higher up the agenda, and then learnings that they may maybe drawn from the case?
Yeah, I think it's probably unsurprising, and the tone of the CBI and the team there has changed in their communications over the last number of years, and even going back to the securities outlook report in 2022. They did call out firms should expect, if they don't have their house in order, they should expect some sanctions. So I don't think it was surprising that the doors are fine eventually. I think what it's done really is Emir was high on everyone's radar, but I think it's really brought it into focus. Nobody wants to get fined. Obviously, that's got issues, from a business perspective, but as an industry in general, where our clients are guardians for their investors and they want to do right by them. So, they want to have the right processes in place. And I think Emir was one of those things. All of our clients in the industry and as a whole is a pretty busy industry, and there's lots for people on their to-do lists. But I think what the fine did was probably kind of just increase the focus on it, raise the profile a bit, probably push it a little bit higher on that to-do list, and maybe encourage firms that were hoping to start something, start it a little bit sooner and actually make some decisions to move on. And we've seen a big increase probably in the last 6 or 8 weeks of firms reaching out looking for help.
And is it too late as we get to the end of February? Somebody's listening to this and thinking, Emir, what?
No, it's not too late now. I think it's never too late to make the right decision. And firms will make a decision post April, in May and June and July and all the rest for the next few months as to what they do once they see how things fall. But we're still onboarding new clients. We have a number of new firms that we're going to be starting to work with over the next few weeks. And one of the great things about our software is we can get people up and running live within a few weeks, full end-to-end process. But the data quality check, which is a really key bit, we can stand that up within a few days. So firms right up until April can get a level of comfort in being able to get their business set up on our software, and we can stand it up in a few days. And it'll get them through the deadline.
Yeah.
But we can get a full end-to-end process set up in a few weeks.
Yeah, and I know whenever a regulatory deadline rolls around, everybody is very focused on that date and the transitional periods and stuff like that. But these things roll past and, in due course, it'll become business as usual to do all of this. I just wonder if you anticipate 18 or 20 months, 24 months forward, what will the reporting look like? I think in terms of governance, I think we're going to see a narrowing of market practices. I think you're going to see generally firms doing some kind of reporting or oversight on a daily basis. And I think it will corral around more detailed monthly reporting. I don't think it'll only be quarterly. I think it'll be monthly, and then it'll be obviously up to the board on a quarterly basis. And that's kind of the governance approach. But what do you see in terms of a few 12, 18, 24 months down the line, how this will all bed in?
From a client who's doing oversight themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, well, the current structure, as we mentioned, is that daily or weekly data quality oversight, and then that monthly reconciliation. I don't see that changing. I see that being the same procedure that clients will take. Probably in the first few months of refit, they'll probably do a daily oversight of data quality, and then that monthly reconciliation back to their admin book of record, and then, as you were saying about the governance reporting, that MIS or that oversight of through stats and dashboards is something that we're integrating into Refit. So all of the live trades will feed into that, which will kind of, enhance that oversight, not only quarterly deliverable from our side with reports, but on a live feed. Yeah.
So I said, it's going to be in 24 months' time. Hopefully, it will have really settled into being something that firms are very comfortable with and very, very good at, albeit I'm sure from time to time issues will arise, but it should hopefully be not the big pain that it is at the moment and the big pressure point that it is at the moment. Before we wrap up, Ger, I just wondered about like Fundrex and your approach to Emir and Emir Refit and what your tools do, because it seems to me you guys kind of got in early days on this, and you've really built up a bank of knowledge that allows you to talk about all of the things associated with it with a lot of authority. So what was the kind of driver for that, or did you spot an opportunity, or how did that come about?
It was kind of a spot an opportunity. A client actually came to us back in 2019, and I think that was first when Emir Refit was starting to be drafted, and that liability was switching on to the Manco, and being a reconciliation provider, reconciliation is an important part of it. So that was kind of the start of it. And there's a couple of things that have evolved from there. Day one, it was reconciliation. Now we've got the data quality checks, the governance reports, the board reports, all of those sorts of things. So first and foremost, Fundrex is a software business, so we provide technology, we provide a tool that our clients use in part of their job. So if it's Emir, it's Emir. But outside of providing a technology that works really well for this use case, we have a really high touch, high support team that Aoife runs, that gets behind all of our clients. We have partnerships with DTCC, partnerships with Regis, and we're looking at extending that in a number of other areas to remove any of the burden around getting data. So we carry that. We make sure. So the big thing with Refit, there's an extra 70 fields, is it, Aoife? But we're managing all of the mapping of that data, all of those sorts of things to make sure that that's, once we go live, that's all in place for clients. So it's a thing that they don't have to worry about. And then kind of outside of the actual delivery, we have a client working group that we set up about 18 months ago now. Clients really have found that beneficial. It gives them an opportunity to...
It's a good opportunity to share information, isn't it, and experiences.
Share knowledge, share experiences, kind of, discuss what's going on with their peers, understanding what everyone else is doing. There's a little bit of grayness in regulation. It's not very black and white. And I think if you took a black and white approach to Emir, you'd be stuck in the weeds all the time and you'd never get anything done. So it's from a customer perspective, the feedback that we've got is that, it's good to understand what everyone else is doing and understand, okay, we're the same as, companies that look like this, and we're the same as our peers. So that gives them a bit of comfort, and as well, being able to gossip a little bit. Everybody likes a bit of a chinwag, and that's been, we moved it. We originally started it online, and we've moved it to hybrid, online and in person. And since we've moved it in person, it's kind of, the engagement's got a lot better. People are starting to get to know each other, on a personal level. So it's been really, really successful. And those are the types of things that we try to do, outside of providing the software. It's kind of, where else can we create value? Where else can we build a community? Where else can we look to support our clients? Because for a lot of firms, Emir is just another thing that they have to do. It's not.
Of course it is, yeah.
It's like, they get completely drowned in regulation and drowned in kind of activities that, obviously aren't core to what they're what they're supposed to be doing. So it's about trying to give them as much support as they can, give them a tool that's light touch, that doesn't require, teams and teams of people to be working on it full time. And then give them access to things like the working group. We run quite a lot of events as well. So things like that are kind of what we're trying to do around Emir, and it's been great for us as a business and as an avenue to start new relationships with new firms and kind of expand our reach within the fund management side of the industry.
That's great. And it sounds like, that's a journey that's got a long way to go yet. And as we think down that track, and something you mentioned earlier on, Gerard, when you said about regulators would like not only that they receive in good data and good quality data in a timely fashion, but that firms would take that data and kind of analyze it as part of their own business analysis. So not only has the data being submitted on time and correctly, but what does that data tell us about the portfolios that we're managing, and what should we do as a result of looking at that data? Is that realistic? Is that like something regulators tell you to make you feel better about putting your hand in your pocket to have to do all this work and get the data to them?
I think that it's probably, I don't think unrealistic is the right way to say it, but I think there's a huge focus on getting refit and reporting done right first. And I think, in general, regulations evolve. Companies are innovative and they look at ways of, reusing the stuff that they do anyway. So, down the line, I think you'll start to see firms, and potentially there's firms out there already that are using some of the data that's been reported for Emir as part of some internal processes. So I think it's aspirational, but I do think, if you look at how things have changed and evolved, it was do the reporting, attestations were fine at one point, they're not anymore. You needed to check, was the reporting done? Then you needed to reconcile it. Then you needed to check the integrity of the data. So the more that this evolves, I think the expectations might increase. There may be another rewrite at some point in the future as well. You never know what's going to happen with the market.
Yeah.
And Emir was a response to 2008. There's a dozen or so, maybe it's 20, I don't know, with the G20 across the globe. Different markets have taken different approaches. Emir was ESMA's response to it, but ASIC in Australia later this year, MAS in Singapore going through big rewrites. There's kind of a more standardization for these derivatives regimes globally, and those are things that we're looking at as well. Quite a few clients that are not to the same extent as Emir, but they're in scope for those, and we're providing solutions already today. So I think there'll be a greater alignment on transaction reporting regimes, and it'll be an evolving thing all the time for firms to try and get a handle on.
This is not going away. So last word to you, Aoife. If somebody's listening to this podcast and thinking, I better crack on with Emir Refit, what are the top two things they could do when they finish listening to get themselves ready?
Well, other than chat to Fundrex, no, I think the main thing is looking at what's your current oversight model for current Emir, if you obviously don't have one, but looking at your trade repository data, where is that coming from, who's reporting it, and then what testing can you do? So I know a big part of any sort of change and getting into a UAT and testing is probably the main part of it, because that's where all your issues initially are going to come from. If that's not something you test prior to the 29th, you can still test it from then. And as I said, you have that 180 days to fix it or, work through it. But yeah, testing and having a solution in place, right, I'd say are the main two things.
And maybe keep that head out of the sand now that you've got it out. Crack on. Okay, listen, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Some great insights there. As I said, that data is running around very quickly for Emir Refit, but it's something that will be with us for a long time to come, it and its future iterations. So thanks very much, Gerard, for joining me on the Quest podcast.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Danny.
The Quest podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.